regular season opening weekend edition of Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and Pete, before we talk NFL, I have to ask you if you got a chance to watch any college football this weekend.
You know, I actually did. It was kind of nice. You know, no NFL. It wrapped up on Thursday, so I had a chance to take in some college games. And one thing I realized is that those games go a very long time. You know, these poor kids in college, I mean, these games just go forever. But, yeah, I got to see a little bit.
I know what you mean because obviously I watched my run and shoot SMU Mustangs, who seemed to run off a minute and a half against Baylor when they got crushed. But that was one of my questions for you. Watching your Fighting Irish beat the tar out of the Rice Owls and the Mustangs getting embarrassed by number 10 Baylor this weekend, it made me want to find out what's the real value, in your opinion, of these top-tier teams playing, you know, either the lesser Division I teams or even 1AA teams. Does it really get them ready for, say, competition in the SEC or the Big 12, or is it just an easy win for them and a big payday for the smaller schools?
Well, you know, there's some truth to the latter part of what you said, but in reality, especially in college, the majority of your improvements are going to come between your first and second game. You know, nobody really wants to start out and have a tough opponent right out of the gate. So for the bigger schools, you know, they'd like to get a nice little quote-unquote warm-up game. It's almost, I hate to call it a preseason, but you know, that's kind of what it is. I mean, I even look at the Minnesota Golden Gophers and their schedule early on is what would appear to be pretty light, but you can never take teams for granted. I remember back in the day, we would open up against Michigan, and it was just a different level of excitement going into the season that way. It was a different level of preparation. It was a lot easier as a player. It's like the whole focus of the offseason was just beating Michigan opening day. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think it was good for the fans. It was good for the players. What it wasn't good for is if you lost.
Yeah.
You know, but now with the playoff system, 4 teams now, I think they're going to, you know, hopefully they'll expand it to 8 at some point. That might make teams a little less likely to have all these warm-ups because the pressure to go undefeated won't be as tight.
You know, on the other hand, you know, instead of taking that easy game, if you're South Carolina playing A&M, you probably wish you had Northern Aggie Tech on your schedule last week, huh?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I caught a little bit of that game during the Vikings game, and I remember it started way before the Viking game started, and I think it ended afterward. I mean, like I said, those high-scoring college games they just go on forever, you know. And you look at 80, 90 snaps a game for some of these college kids, and, you know, they play 10 or 11, maybe even 12 games. They're getting almost as many snaps in as professional teams, because I think the average professional team, you know, you're going to get maybe 65 or 60. So you're looking at 20 to 30 more snaps a game. I mean, that's, you know, 3 over the course of the season, and it ends up adding up.
I'll bet. Well, as we turn to the NFL, it was cutdown day this weekend. And Pete, as a former player and a coach, I know you've been through this drill a whole lot. Can you give the fans an idea of what type of anxiety goes through a bubble player's mind as he waits to get the word of his fate?
You know, I've been on both sides of this issue, and by being on both sides, I mean I was cut as a rookie and then signed to the practice squad. And then in 2000, in my 7th year, I was cut again and brought back later. So I've been on that side of it. And then as a coach, I was actually the Turk. I was the guy that would go down and find guys and tell them that they need to see the head coach. I need their playbook. So I've been on both sides in that sense. And I think the one thing is when you have a roster with 80-some guys on it, there's quite a number of them that realize that they don't belong. And so they're not really surprised, number one, when it happens. And I think, number two, it's a good thing that it happens at the end of camp when you're tired and you're beat up. I think it makes it a little bit less of a emotional event, so to speak. Mm-hmm. You know, because at least you're going to get a day or two to recover. You know, people talk about it, you know, what's it like to have your dreams crushed, you know, things like that. And it's something that you deal with, and you can never take football for granted, or, you know, sports in general. You know what I mean? You just never know when it's going to end, and just enjoy every minute of it. But I do think that most of these guys that are drafted and work their rear ends off in camp and stay healthy and play hard end up on a roster somewhere, whether it be a practice squad or whether it be, you know, as an active player.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because one of the things I was thinking about asking tonight is, you know, how do they pick the Turk? Now we know it was you. Is it low man on the totem pole? I mean, who gets that job?
It all depends. I mean, sometimes in some organizations it's a front office guy that really has no interaction with the players at all. I think I was chosen because I had gone from playing to being a coach, and it was a kind of a way to build separation. I think the toughest thing I ever did was cutting a guy named Womansky Hall, who was once my teammate. That was a really tough thing to do. But again, it's part of the business, and I don't want to make light of it or anything like that. I did, I'll say this: so I did see one kid talk his way out of getting cut. We had a guy in camp who I went and got his playbook and sent him up to see Coach Tice, and sure enough, he was there the next morning. And I went up to him, and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I talked to Mike for a while, and I'm still here." So. I told him, I'm like, well, you need to be a salesman when you're done playing, son, because I've never seen that before. I've never even heard of it before, a guy talking himself out of getting cut.
That is pretty impressive. I was going to say, under Mike Tice, and you obviously were helping coach the linebackers, when it's final cutdown day, how much say do you have in it? How much say is the defensive coordinator? How much for the head coach? Who makes these final calls?
The final calls are really made by the organizational structure. If you have a GM, at the time with us, it was a combination of the head coach, Mike Tice, Rob Brzezinski, and I think Scott Studwell had some say as well. So they just kind of worked together to come to agreement. Right now, it would all be on Rick Spielman, the general manager, and I'm sure Mike Zimmer has a lot of input. Norv Turner has a lot of input. Everybody's allowed to offer up their opinion at any time, no question about it. And during the course of camp, especially early on, you have a lot of personnel meetings, so to speak. The college scouts will come in and sit in the room and really just talk personnel. And that's when guys are put in categories, and you'll see some of these guys that they want to take a look at might get a few extra snaps, in the weeks to come, especially when it's 2s-on-2s or 3s-on-3s. I mean, once you start getting into game planning, which occurs somewhat into game 3 of the preseason and into game 4, there's not much left in the way of, making an impression. And I think the biggest mistake that guys make coming into the NFL is special teams, because if you're not a starter, if you're not going to be a starter, then you have to play special teams. And you get so many guys that just don't want to embrace it. They didn't play special teams in college, except maybe when they were freshmen or sophomores. They start for 2 or 3 years, and not that they think it's beneath them, but they just don't look at that as their job. They don't look at it as a career, being a special teams player. And your special teams coach is your best friend or worst enemy when it comes to cutdown date.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, among the cuts that we saw on the Vikings, I was surprised to see that they only kept 2 tight ends who were on the camp roster, and Kyle Rudolph and Rhett Ellison. And then we picked up former Minnesota Gophers quarterback Marquise Gray to fill that 3rd slot. I'm curious, Pete, were you surprised to see the Vikings go with such an unproven 3rd tight end in Norv's offense? And what are your thoughts about Gray as a tight end?
I haven't really had a chance to see him play much as a tight end. I do know he's a really good athlete. I'm thinking to myself, my God, didn't we just do this with Joe Webb? Trying to find a place to put him, because he's a hell of a guy and a heck of an athlete. And I think you're getting kind of the same thing with this kid. But the difference, though, being that Norv Turner actually coached him, knows what he's about, knows his potential. And I think when you looked at the first round of cuts, when they got down to 53, and you saw that there were 8 linebackers on the roster and only 2 tight ends, it raised a flag. I'm going to definitely defer to the powers that be, that they know what they're doing. But yeah, it seemed kind of odd that we would keep 8 linebackers, and then, they released Larry Dean to make room. And I think that keeping guys like Mike Motti and some of these other guys, I think it just goes to show that contribution on defense is as important as special teams for them. I think they're just keeping the best players, and then, those are the guys who have to jump over special teams. I don't think there's a quote-unquote special teams specialist, if you will. When I played, we had a guy named Harold Morrow, who was a running back, who I don't even know if he ever carried the football. He was just a hellacious special teams player. So they're not holding any spots for a guy to be just a special teams ace. I think they're looking for guys that can eventually turn into starters on offense or defense.
Yeah, well, the other thing I noticed with the final roster was it seemed whenever it was possible, Viking head coach Mike Zimmer went with youth over experience. And if that's the way he's going, what are the benefits and negatives of that type of strategy?
I think if you're planning for the future and if you expect to be there for a while, I think that's kind of the way to go. You look at guys like Kyle Rudolph, guys that you draft, and then they're into their 2nd contract. Those are the guys that you're expecting to really come through and produce for you. In youth as well, you're not getting as much in the way of a salary, maybe not getting as much in the way of baggage. I think for older guys, and it happens to all of us and all of those guys that have been around in the league for, 4, 5, 6 years, you get kind of set in your ways. And I don't mean it like in a you're not going to work kind of way, but from a technique standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, you just kind of get set in your ways. And sometimes the veterans are the ones that have the hardest time adapting and changing to a new scheme, to new fundamentals, to new coaching style, those kinds of things. So for coaching staff, younger guys are good because you expect them to stay healthy. You expect that are more easily moldable, malleable, so to speak, to turn them into what you want. But experience is what wins football games, and you see it somewhat during the regular season, but a lot of times in the playoffs, that young guys, they struggle. They need to get the experience is valuable of an asset as you can have as a player, but one of the hardest things to get.
Pete, when we look around the NFL, we're seeing more teams deciding to go with just 2 quarterbacks in that active roster. And with the speed and the violence of the game, just a couple of hits can deplete your quarterback depth. How risky is that approach for a team?
Well, I think it's risky for a game. If you were somehow to get 2 quarterbacks knocked out in a game, and then you happen to have a position player like a Percy Harvin, I remember he would be ready for us, or someone along those lines, they'll definitely say, hey, you know what, we're definitely giving up this game, and if we lose 2 quarterbacks, the odds of us finding a third and going out and winning are going to be slim to none anyway, so why not just use that roster spot for somebody else? So they'll just go on the street and pick somebody up. And if you're down your 3rd quarterback, your season, good luck. Good luck with your season. And I do think it's risky because quarterback is one position where, you look at Sean Hill now starting for the Rams. You don't have to be a college star. You don't have to have a ton of starts in the league. If you're a quarterback and you can learn the system and mentally get your head right, it can make up for a ton, in lack of arm strength or just speed or physical ability. It's amazing. Not all your best quarterbacks are your greatest athletes. It's what they have between the ears that matters. And, again, if you're looking at a backup quarterback and you've got a veteran who has some experience and some live snaps, I think the players are going to respond to him better than, let's say, a rookie or someone that's not very known.
Sure. And that's probably the reason the Vikings maybe erred on the side of conservative to make sure they went with Matt Castle versus Teddy Bridgewater. Castle probably won the position, but that's a safe way to go, right?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be better for both in the long run. I really do. This team isn't going to go anywhere if the defense is ranked 32nd or 31st or 32nd against the pass or 32nd in scoring or, if you're in the bottom of the league on defense, you're not going to go anywhere anyway, period. You look kind of at the story that's building, and even in the preseason, the plus minuses and lack of turnovers on offense and the turnovers they got on defense made a big difference. And so I think when you look at someone like Castle, he's out there really because he's going to make good decisions. He's going to run this team. He's going to adapt to a new system very quickly. And then for a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, he just needs to get as much time under his belt as he can, even if maybe he's not even playing, but as long as he can experience game day, learn what it's like. There's so many new things. How long the season is, that's one thing for rookies. It's, you get in the game 10 or 12, and you still have 4 or 5 games left, 6 games left, and, you're kind of wide-eyed because you're just like, my God, when is this thing going to end? Yeah. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have the ups and downs of a college season. It's just game after game after game.
Yeah. Well, we speak of the quarterback position. The Chiefs awarded their quarterback Alex Smith with a 4-year, $68 million contract the other day. And it seems like yesterday that Smith was labeled a first-round bust in San Francisco. You saw him in the preseason. Was $45 million in guaranteed money to Smith a good investment for the Chiefs?
Well, I don't think anybody's going to question Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid can develop talent. One of the things I remember most about Alex Smith when he was in San Francisco is I believe in the first, I think he was there for 5 or 6 years, but he had a different offensive coordinator almost every single year. In fact, every single year that he was there. So he never really had a chance to settle into a system. A very talented player, or else he wouldn't have been drafted in the first round. But at the same time, he's, I think, fallen into a system. I think it's going to be the best thing for him.
It's opening weekend in the NFL, and the Vikings go out to St. Louis to play the Rams. But, what's a game day schedule look like for a player for a noon game? And what type of anxiety would a starter like an Anthony Barr be feeling for his first game?
For a guy like him in the first game, it's going to be different. It's going to be unique. He'll never forget it. There won't be any other games like it. One thing that surprises people is just how quickly the team goes down there and comes back. You usually show up between 4 and 5 local time the day before the game. Players will have a couple hours to go get dinner if they would like or do whatever. And then they start with meetings at around 8 o'clock. There are meetings till 10:30, and then it's bed check at 11. So they got to be in their rooms at 11 o'clock. The latest you're going to get there 2 hours before the game. There's always a bus that gets you there at 10 in the morning, and there'll be one that'll get you there at 9 if you'd like. And depending on how long it takes to get to the stadium. That bus could leave at 8:30, 8:45, and 9:30, 9:45. But for a guy like Barr, I think he'd be best served to stay in the hotel as long as he can. Just get to the stadium, get yourself ready, and then just go. It's amazing how during the week you have about 15 minutes to get ready for practice, and then you have 2 hours to get ready for a football game. So for him, just keeping calm and not wearing himself out. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, I remember my first game. I mean, the first game that I got to play in was in Lambeau Field, and fortunately, I had been around for a while, so I didn't have the same kind of anxiety that I think a rookie who's going to start for the first time, would have. So you keep it light on him mentally, temper your expectations as far as that goes, and just let the kid go out and be an athlete. And for Barr, he's a very quiet kid. Seems like a very, level-headed kid. So I don't know if, he's going to have a problem with the engine running too hot for too long before the game and wearing himself out.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I remember when I was in college playing, and we always had this group of guys who needed about 15 minutes before we went on the field to go in the bathroom and throw up. So does that still happen in the NFL? Do people get nervous like that?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I don't know if it's nerves or anxiety. And the thing that's interesting is that it builds and it builds and it builds. I mean, you get a chance to relax on the plane right out there. Even on home games, these guys stay in a hotel the night before the game. And so once you start meetings at 8 o'clock the night before, and that's all you're dealing with. That's all you're looking at. That's all you're thinking about. Then you have a team meeting either around 10, 10:30 or whenever it is, and that really sets the tone for the next morning. It just builds. So you work on getting a good night's sleep, but when you get up in the morning, that you got to be prepared to, like Robert Smith used to do, and it's run until he threw up, and you got to prepare to put your body through hell for about 3 hours, and it's an altered kind of mental state. It's such a preparedness that you spend a week getting ready, but then it all crescendos right there during that night before, and then the day of, and so. You don't see guys too much messing around or seeing family too much or doing, having fun or whatever, maybe playing cards and doing things like that. But you're definitely in a much more subdued type physical state, you know what I mean? Getting ready for waking up, smelling football, getting ready, going to the stadium, and getting yourself loosened up and ready to go.
Yeah, no doubt. And obviously the Vikings are going out of town, and it's hard to get a road win in the NFL, but what are the things that the Vikings need to do to give Mike Zimmer a shot at his first regular season win as a head coach this weekend?
Yeah, there's a lot of the cliches that you can say. I mean, on the road, turnovers, protecting the football, all those kinds of things. And I think that the only reason why I would even bring that up is just, Adrian not having any carries in the preseason. I always, and this is just me, I always worry about a guy in ball security when he hasn't really been hit at all in the preseason. They may say that Adrian's taken some hits and things. No one's going to bring him to the ground in practice for risk of hurting him, because if you hurt the guy, then you're gone. Mm-hmm. Talk about a rookie getting cut quickly. It'd be someone that would hit AP and hurt him. So
yeah, by the way, you'd get to know the Turk really quick there, right?
Exactly. You wouldn't know if you'd last through the practice. So those are the cliche things. I think defensively, it's going to be a game where points are at a premium. The Rams, they had a very good defense last year. I think they expect to continue that. They have a very good front seven. So field position, meaning offense and defense and special teams working together. So if you get the ball at the 20, making sure you get it to around midfield, punt, try to back up their offense. We brought Sean Hill in when he came out of Maryland. He's just a smart kid, a great guy. And a better quarterback and a better athlete, I think, than people give him credit for. And so it's not as if you can just sit back and relax because Sean Hill's taking the helm. He's done some very, very good things as a backup in Detroit. He's done some very good things even when he was out in San Francisco. So you just have to make sure, though, when he gets in there that you make him make all the tough throws. You don't give him anything. You got to obviously shut down the run. And with Linval Joseph back practicing this week, I think the Vikings front seven will be intact. And give him a 3-and-out, make a punt, you return the ball, and now you're at midfield. And now you only need to go 15, 20 yards for a field goal. And that's the kind of game that it's going to have to be. Because I don't think either offense, for different reasons, is going to be super high power. This is not going to be you never know. This is the NFL, but this is not going to be a 42 to 35 kind of football game. The Rams defense is just too good. And I think our defense has improved enough, and I don't know if their offense has the teeth with the change of quarterback.
Yeah, well, Pete, to close out our mail call session this week, we got a question that we've held for a couple of weeks, and we keep on getting it. So I'm going to ask you tonight, and really what it's coming from is people read your profile on Wikipedia, and it indicates you were an interior decorator for the Vikings for 5 years. So here's our couple questions about this. First of all, is there anything we need to know? For instance, do we need to worry about you leaving the broadcast booth for another career? And most importantly, what seating choices are best to go with shag carpeting?
Oh my God! Just make sure the carpet matches the drapes, right? No, good old Wikipedia. You just remember you can believe everything you read on Wikipedia, right? Yeah, it's a bit. I do a local radio show with Dan the Common Man Cole, who refers to me as a former Viking interior decorator, and I know I did get a chance to fill in for Common, a few years ago when I first started doing some fill-ins, and I had stated that was the greatest moment of my life, and I believe that's on the Wikipedia page as well. So, don't believe everything you read, but at the same time, believe everything you read.
Sounds good. Well, if I pick up some furniture, I'll at least give you a call and give you a first right of refusal on them, all right?
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
Well, that brings a close to a Pete Bercich Viking mail call for this week. And don't forget to turn down the sound on your TV this Sunday and turn up the Vikings radio network broadcast to hear all of Pete's in-game analysis. And you can also keep up to date on both the NFL and college happenings by visiting Pete's football website at PeteBFootball.com or by following him on Twitter at Pete Bercich. So until next week, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. So long, everyone.